No,
give
I'm not
us a
going to give you a
question?
I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir,
go ahead.
Can you state categorically that nobody...
The applause in the crowd is indicative of a problem many people have in the United States right now. Whether they call it fake news or something else, news coverage is undoubtedly under an intense microscope. That's why one Georgia legislator says he wrote Georgia House Bill 734, the Ethics in Journalism Act.
When there's discontent relative to the integrity or credibility of the media, my bill is just a reflection of that concern that the constituents have raised with me.
Now former Georgia State Representative Andrew Welch considers the news media the fourth branch of government, a necessary watchdog over the other three. But he points to a 2018 Gallup poll to highlight a problem. It says only 45% of Americans trust news media to report the news fully, accurately, and fairly. Only 41% of Americans felt that confidence in 2017, and an abysmal 32% in the election year of 2016, the lowest the poll has ever recorded. Fast forward to 2019, people still have lots of opinions on how the news is reported. So Welch, like a few states before him, is throwing out a potential solution.
I had actually asked the University of Georgia's liaison about journalistic ethics and what standards would there be universally for journalists across the board. And the answers were that there really isn't a set of journalistic ethics other than what's published by the Society of Professional Journalists. That is a non-binding code of ethics that is published by that organization. In reviewing those, I found that that was helpful guidance in drafting the legislation.
Welch's legislation appoints the chancellor of the University System of Georgia to nominate board members who are journalists in the state to create a canon of ethics. Then journalists and their organizations can earn accreditation, committing to following rules and possibly receive a range of punishments for violating the ethics.
And you and I talked about the First Amendment. You are very aware of, whoever may oppose this is going to probably fight it with the First Amendment. And can you explain to me why this does not violate it?
Well, I don't think it violates it. And the intention here was not to make it mandatory. And so as you read the bill, you'll see that it is absolutely permissive in its nature.
My first reaction was, A, this is ridiculous. B, I thought about South Carolina and Indiana and, the publicity stunts that went on there. And then as I thought about it a little bit more deeply, I did, come to see the real threat that is posed by a bill like this, regardless of its chance of passing.
Jonathan Peters is an assistant journalism professor and affiliate law professor at the University of Georgia, the birthplace of the Journalism Ethics Board should this bill pass. And to say he believes this bill or any regulation of journalistic ethics is unconstitutional would be an understatement.
Obviously, I asked him about the First Amendment, and his response to that was that because this bill, the board that this bill would create does not have actual elected officials on it, that the government is not meddling. Is that a fair way to put that? Does that still violate the First Amendment?
I think it's a slight mischaracterization of what the bill actually says, because the bill does say that the board would be voluntary and would be independent of the government, but at the same time, the person who selects the people who then select the members of the board is a government official, and that would be the head of the University of Georgia's system.
Both Peters and Welch say the Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics does lay out proper, respectable guidelines that, if followed, would lead to a trustworthy reputation for news media. It encourages journalists to do things like provide context, update and correct stories, and identify sources. Where they disagree is if it should remain voluntary.
It's interesting to me that I had a reporter ask me in the gaggle of reporters that wanted an interview after the bill was dropped, asked me, well, are you aware of the Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics? And I said, I am. And in fact, that's a voluntary set of code of ethics that those members of the society voluntarily agree to follow. And so I responded to her question about that. Well, why wouldn't it be appropriate for this journalistic board of ethics that would be in the state of Georgia to adopt a mirror image of those code of ethics and ask the journalists in the state of Georgia to abide by them?
Is there a concern about journalists following them or not?
There is this need for people to abide and ethically produce and publish content. Absolutely, I totally agree with that. Now, how do you hold people accountable if they are not doing this? The journalism industry as a whole kind of does that by self-regulating itself, by if someone is going to be unethical, they will have a very hard time getting a job again at an ethical news organization.
Lynn Walsh is responsible for upholding SBJ's ethical code.
We, as journalists and as the public, we have to realize that the trust in even news, local and national and international and regional, is at a very low point. And we, as journalists and as the public, should be very concerned about this. So as journalists, our role has to be to kind of talk about this and try to fix that. How can we do that? Let's be more transparent about our reporting processes. Let's explain how we do our jobs. Let's also ask readers and users why they feel this way. Maybe there is valid criticism that is about our content. And in some cases, it is valid criticism. If we did something that is not as good as it can be, let's admit it, and let's try to be better by doing a follow-up story. Those are things, journalists can do.
She shared her thoughts and possible solutions with former Representative Welch on Twitter soon after the bill made news. She proposed a way for news consumers to handle their concerns without government involvement.
If there are issues that people have with how they are being covered by news organizations, they should have those conversations with the reporters directly.
What do you say to people who just kind of blanket say, this is a bad idea?
Given the tremendous downward trends over the last 30 to 40 years of the public's perception of media and the credibility of media, I would hope that professionals within that industry would say, what can we do to reestablish the public trust